So we're at location 1 in our restoration treatments from 2001, 2002. I remember the helicopter landing here at that time, and this had been totally churned up by the ATV traffic, the people who came mud bogging in here, as they like to say. You can still see a few of the little ruts coming into the meadow. The restoration treatment here simply consisted of blocking entrance to this meadow. A few logs across the way, a nicely placed sign asking people to respect the restoration work in progress. And it's recovered quite nicely by itself. We have a meadow here of sedges and cotton grass and some spike rushes, and this is what it should be. The diversity might be a little bit lower than it had been in the past, but the other wildflowers and other species are coming in nicely.
Okay, so that's how it looks today with the boardwalk. And that is how it looked years ago. What would be the date?
Yeah, so that was taken in 2002, so 11 years ago. So this is one of our treatment transects where we had applied wild seed collected from the cotton grass in the vicinity and spread it by hand over the disturbed area here. It's hard to believe, but 12 years ago this was literally a soup of peat churned up by the ATVs going back and forth through it over the previous several years. So I can see some of the species that we planted here, the alpine bluegrass, some of the cotton grass has recovered. I see we've got a new grass species in here as well that I'm not quite sure what that is. I'd like to take credit for the recovery of the meadow here, but in fact the treatments that just amounted to leveling of the ruts and allowing the natural regenerative capacities of the meadow to express themselves were just as effective as the ones where we transplanted material into the site. So the real lesson here is just to keep these areas from ongoing disturbance. Even though they can be severely damaged, they can recover, but it takes a decade or more and requires freedom from ongoing disturbance. So not all of this ground is equally sensitive. Some of the upland sites or those with a gravel or rocky base can withstand some traffic. But key to the resilience of a lot of these ecosystems is simply the frequency of travel and disruption. You know, a pass of 1 or 2 vehicles in the dry season, the vegetation can bounce back. It's the repeated use. If there's a whole gang of people going up, follow the leader. If they're spinning their wheels and breaking all the rhizomes and vegetation to bits in the process, it's that repeated disturbance, that intense disturbance that results in the long-term degradation and the inability of the ecosystem to recover. Instead, it'll snowball and you'll keep losing soil, you'll keep losing plant species, you'll keep losing your hydrological functioning. This meadow was not as damaged, if at all, as the other meadows, and even though the sedges and cotton grass has come back over there, one thing we might have noticed that the other meadow doesn't have are these orchids. So these Platanthera orchids are missing from the areas that had been churned up by the ATV. So even though green matter has returned there, a lot of its biodiversity and some of the more interesting plant species have not. So this is one of our repeat photography sites where you can see there originally had been a track with a couple of ruts parallel to each other, and over the years those have filled in a little bit. Again, the key has been it hasn't been repeatedly disturbed. It's taken 10 years, 12 years, but you can still see where the machine had gone. I don't know if there had been multiple passes or even just a single pass. But unless it is kept free from ongoing traffic, it wouldn't have a chance to recover. Right now, it looks like it's doing quite well, and we would call this a successful reclamation. So this is an example of how restoration doesn't always work, and how the effects of the off-road vehicle use can become accentuated over time. This area had been filled in, the ruts had been blocked and dammed to prevent the ongoing drainage from the upper sedge meadows, but it eventually blew out, and we see we have an ongoing trickle of water in one of these ruts going down 40 centimeters, maybe, a foot and a half, and this is continuing to degrade this meadow and the hydrology of the meadows above it. So the take-home message here is fix-it efforts do not always work. Introduced to the site, even though it's typically not found on these wet meadows. It is a good alpine, subalpine species, but one could ask, is it a good thing to introduce to this location? Likewise, this is Arnica chamasonis, also a native species, but if we look in the woods and elsewhere on the meadows, it's Arnica latifolia that's probably more common. So were we doing a good thing or a bad thing by trying to introduce an Arnica species into these meadows, which maybe doesn't belong here? Still a native plant, still, you know, contributes to a wildflower meadow, but the restoration efforts are always compromised by the availability of plant materials and our knowledge of the site, and often the materials and the local ecology don't match up. So maybe we'd have been better off not planting these here. So this area looks like it has not recovered at all and continues to erode down in the wheel tracks, where the slope is such that any drainage from upslope has been captured and is now eroding down through the organics and into the mineral soil. And it's really altered the hydrology of these subalpine meadows, which depend on that organic material to sort of hold the moisture and keep them wet throughout the summer. So here instead we have dry, bare soil patches. And it's really changed the hydrology and hence the ecology of this little part of the mountain. I'll start down here.
Okay.
So what's perhaps not so apparent is that these subalpine fens and sloping meadows, with their huge deposits of peat, are, I think you used the expression before, Jim, are like a big sponge. So there's a lot of water held in the peat, in the vegetation on the slope of this mountain, that otherwise would just be running out in the spring and would dry up in the summer. So these little streams and rivulets that are draining each one of these little meadows then contributes to, you know, the larger Big Oliver Creek and onto the Skeena and so forth. If we did not have these little rivulets delivering water throughout the year, we would not have an even stream flow and suitable cold water for the salmon to spawn in and so forth. So the role of these meadows and their hydrology, keeping that drainage of water limited and controlled as it is by the vegetation, is really critical to the overall hydrology of the region.